Good morning, everyone. Today, we will tackle about product costing allocation methods. When we say product costing, it is the cost incurred for a manufacturing company to produce a product that is intended to be sold in the market. This cost includes direct materials, direct labor, and manufacturing overhead. In the previous chapters, we understood that direct materials are assigned to product cost via material requisition forms, and direct labor is allocated to product cost using time tickets. Direct materials and direct labor cost are easily traceable to these source documents, so accuracy in assigning these costs is not difficult to achieve. However, manufacturing overhead cannot be allocated to products using source documents. Basically, in this chapter, we will only be discussing how to allocate manufacturing overhead costs, since this includes indirect costs that cannot be traced to the finished product. As factories become more and more mechanized, factory overhead becomes a larger portion of product cost, and as a result, assigning factory overhead to individual products being manufactured becomes more important. In allocating manufacturing overhead cost, we can use either one of these three methods. First is the single plant-wide factory overhead rate method. Second is the multiple production department rate method. And lastly is the activity-based costing method. The choice of which allocation method to use is important to managers because the allocation affects the product cost, as shown in exhibit number 1. Managers are concerned about the accuracy of product cost, which are used for decisions such as determining product mix, establishing product price, and determining whether to discontinue a product line. Now, we will be discussing what is a single plant-wide factory overhead rate method. Under this allocation method, factory overhead costs are allocated to products using only one rate. To get the single plant-wide factory overhead rate, we must divide the total budgeted factory overhead with the total budgeted plant-wide allocation base. The budgeted allocation base is a measure of operating activity in the factory. Common allocation bases includes direct labor hours, direct labor cost, and machine hours. An example in computing using the single plant-wide factory overhead rate method is in the case of Morris Company. The total factory overhead for Morris Company is budgeted for the year at $650,000. Morris manufactures two office furniture products, a credenza and a desk. The credenza and desk each require 4 direct labor hours to manufacture. Each product is budgeted for 5,000 units of production for the year. Now, we are required to determine the total number of budgeted direct labor hours for the year, the single plant-wide factory overhead rate, and the factory overhead allocated per unit for each product using the single plant-wide factory overhead rate. For the first requirement, in order to get the total budgeted direct labor hours for the year of each product line, we must multiply the budgeted product volume and the number of direct labor hours needed in order to manufacture a single product. Since we are given a uniform budgeted product volume of 5,000 units and direct labor hours of 4 hours, Credenza and Desk has the same number of budgeted direct labor hours for the entire year, which is 20,000 each, with a total of 40,000 direct labor hours. For the second requirement, using the formula provided on the previous slide, we will then divide the total budgeted factory overhead of $650,000 by the total budgeted plant-wide allocation base of 40,000 direct labor hours. We then arrive with $16.25 per direct labor hours. Lastly, the factory overhead allocated per unit of each product line will be $65 per unit. This is because we multiply the single plant-wide factory overhead rate against the number of direct labor hours needed to produce a single product. Single plant-wide factory overhead rate method is practical when, first, the overhead costs are closely related to product volume. Second is the company only produces one product. The following are the advantages of using single plant-wide factory overhead rate method. First, the information is readily available. Second, its implementation is simple, and since the information is readily available, it is now sufficient enough to meet the financial accounting requirements. And lastly, it is very cost effective.
Objective number 3, multiple production department factory overhead rate method. So before going beyond with this topic, let us first define what is multiple production department factory overhead rate method. As per definition, that multiple production department factory overhead rate method uses different rate for each production department to allocate factory overhead costs to products. Now let's go with exhibit number 3, which compare the single plant-wide rate between the multiple production department rate method. So as what we can see in the illustration, that single plant-wide rate method uses only one rate to allocate factory overhead costs, whereas in a multiple production department rate uses two departments, which are the fabrication department factory overhead and the assembly department factory overhead. To further understand these two departments under multiple production department, so let's define what is fabrication department. So fabrication department for the illustration of Ruiz company, it means the fabrication department cuts the metal to the shape of the product. In assembly department, which manually assembles machine pieces into a final product. So for the illustration, Ruiz company has a total budgeted factory overhead amounting to $1,600,000. So it would be divided into two departments. From fabrication department, there is $1,030,000 under budgeted factory overhead costs, and assembly department for $570,000. The total budgeted factory overhead cost of $1,600,000. So before going beyond or before showing the calculations on the Ruiz company illustrations, so let us first define what is a departmental overhead rate. So as per definition again, it is an expense rate calculated for each department in a factory production process. The departmental overhead rate is different at every stage of the production process when various departments perform selected steps to complete the final process. So let's go with the calculations. So we have here production department factory overhead rate calculations. So this is the formula. Production department factory overhead rate equals budgeted department factory overhead divided by or over budgeted department allocation base. So to illustrate, we have here Ruiz company uses direct labor hours as the allocation base for the fabrication and assembly departments. So each department uses 10,000 direct labor hours. So 10,000 for assembly departments and 10,000 direct labor hours for fabrication. So given with the formula also again, so we have here the fabrication department factory overhead rate of equals budgeted department factory overhead rate of $1,030,000 over the budgeted department allocation base, which is 10,000 direct labor hours. So the total, the to sum up with, budgeted department factory overhead rate of $1,030,000 over 10,000 direct labor hours. So it would be divided. So the answer would be $103 direct labor hours. On the other hand, the same equation, the same formula. So we have $57 per direct labor hours for assembly department factory overhead rate. So okay, moving forward, we have 10 direct labor hours are required for the manufacture of each product, the snowmobile and the riding mower. So these 10 hours are consumed in the fabrication as well as in the assembly department. So here are the following computation as follows. So under snowmobile, we have 8 hours in fabrication department. And in assembly department, we have $2 in total direct labor hours per unit of 10 hours. On the other hand, in riding mower, we also have 2 hours under fabrication department and 8 hours under assembly department. So we have also 10 hours direct labor hours per unit. So for further illustration, we have your exhibit number 4, allocating factory overhead to products service company. So in exhibit number 4, it is shown that the factory overhead allocated to each mobile and a snowmobile and riding mower is the snowmobile allocated 938 of total factory overhead costs. On the other hand, each riding mower is allocated 662 of factory overhead costs. So how did we come up with this answer, or how we did come up with this cost or factory overhead cost? So the formula given is allocation base usage per unit multiplied by production department factory overhead rate. Using the previous illustration under snowmobile, we have fabrication department of under fabrication department allocation based usage per unit 8 direct labor hours, so multiplied by 103 per direct labor hours. The allocated factory overhead rate under snowmobile is $824. With the same equation, the same formula, under assembly department, we also have 2 direct labor hours multiplied by 57 per direct labor hours. So we have 114. To get the total factory overhead cost per snowmobile, so we simply add the two department. So we come up with $938. And on the other hand, also we have riding mower, the same formula use allocation based usage per unit multiplied by production department factory overhead rate. So we come up with $206 allocated factory overhead rate per unit of product under fabrication department for riding mower, and 456 allocated factory overhead per unit of product under assembly department. The same formula again. The total factory overhead cost per riding mower, we simply add two department under a factory department, $200, and assembly department, which is 456. So we come up with $662, the total factory overhead cost per riding mower. Okay, so to summarize, let's see the exhibit number 5. So exhibit number 5 summarizes the multiple production department rate allocation method for Ruiz Company. Exhibit number 5 indicates that the fabrication department factory overhead rate is $103 per direct labor hour, while the assembly department rate is $57 per direct labor hour. Since the snowmobile uses more fabrication department direct labor hours than does the riding mower, so the total overhead located to each snowmobile is 206 greater. So we simply deducted 938 from, we simply deducted 938 with 662 under right under under riding mower. So it is 276 greater. So let's see the further illustration in exhibit number 5. So here we can see that there is 938 per unit under fabrication department, and there is 662 uh, dollars per unit under assembly department for each product, I mean. Okay, going beyond with another uh, illustration yes, um, or another topic. So we have here distortion of product costs. Now, before knowing how and when does distortion of product costs happen in an organization or in a company, let us first define what is distortion of product costs. So, cost distortion from product differences occur when there are variations in product size and product complexity. So, small products tend to require less production volume related inputs such as direct labor time than large products, although they do not require less support in proportion to their size. So let us go with different kind of conditions when the distortion of product happen in a company. So condition number one, differences in production department factory overhead rates, or some departments have high rates whereas others have low rates. Condition number two, differences among products in the ratios of allocation based usage within a department and across departments. Some products have high ratio of allocation based usage which within departments, whereas other products have a low ratio of allocation based usage within the same departments. So exhibit number 6 shows the conditions of for product cost distortion for Ruiz Company. So we have here the differences in Ruiz Company's factory overhead for each snowmobile and riding mower using the single plant wide and a multiple production department factory overhead rate method are as follows. So we have here the factory overhead cost per unit under single plant wide method. No, it is compared between multiple production department method between two products. So we have snowmobile and riding mower. So under single plant wide method, we have $800. And since it is single plant wide method, it uses only one rate. So the same with riding mower, it also has $800 factory overhead cost per unit. And on the other hand, we also have multiple production department method, which is calculated on the previous slide, which is under snowmobile, there is 938. And under riding mower, there is 662 factory overhead costs. Uh, and then, uh, and then to get the difference, we simply deducted the single plant-wide method under snowmobile is 800 deducted with multiple production department method which is $938. So we can see that there is under costing, which means snowmobile is allocated enough uh, snowmobile, so enough costs, and thus this is undercosted by 138. So in on the other hand, the riding mower is allocated too much cost and is overcosted by 138 as shown in the illustration. So the single planted factory overhead rate distorts product costs by averaging high and low factory overhead costs. So we will also calculate the ratio of allocation base usage under fabrication department and assembly department. So to get the ratio, so we have here the formula. Ratio of allocation based usage in the fabrication department equals direct labor hours for snowmobile, which is 8 hours, over direct labor hours for riding mowers, we have 2 hours. So to get the ratio, we simply divide 8 hours into 2 hours, so we have 4 is to 1. So on the other hand, we also have ratio of allocation based usage in the production in the fabrication department. Okay, so we have here, I mean, in assembly department, so we have here the same formula used. So we have 2 hours over 8 hours, so we have 1 is to 4 ratio. So because both conditions exist for Ruiz Company, the product cost from using the single plant-wide factory overhead rate are distorted. So, the preceding conditions and the resulting product cost distortions are summarized. To further understand, so let us see the conditions under product conditions for product cost distortion for Ruiz Company. So, condition number one also exists in Ruiz Company, because the factory overhead rate for fabrication department is 103. So, shown in the illustration, it is $103 per direct labor hour, whereas the rate for assembly is only 57 per direct labor hour. However, this condition by itself is will cause product cost distortions. On the other hand, on the other condition number two is also exists in a Ruiz Company for snowmobile, because the snowmobile consumes 8 direct labor hours in the fabrication department, whereas the riding mowers consumes only 2 direct labor hours. So that is how we come up with a ratio of allocation based usage, which is 4 is to 1 and 1 is to 4. So to further understand the multiple production department factory and the formulas, so I highly recommend that you do some example exercises, and then you can follow the examples and read.
Good morning, everyone. I am Amy M. Cañada to discuss the fourth objective for this activity: to use activity-based costing for product costing. Let's do a short recap. Earlier, Ms. Jennifer discussed about how using a single plant-wide factory overhead rate works. A certain amount of total budgeted factory overhead is divided by the total budgeted plant-wide allocation base to derive the single plant-wide factory overhead rate. A common allocation-based use in the illustrative example is using the total direct labor hours. And Ms. Silvera discussed the difference when multiple production department factory overhead rate method is used as against the single plant-wide factory overhead rate. With this method, several production departments are identified to which the factory overhead costs are allocated, resulting to different rates. In the illustrative example, 2 departments were identified, namely assembly and fabrication departments, in which the allocation base is still the direct labor hours, but the volume is limited to the specific department only. Using the single plant-wide factory overhead rate may result in distorted product cost because of the use of a single rate for the entire factory overhead. And with multiple production department factory overhead rates, distortion can still be expected with the product cost, since only one activity base is considered but with different departments. No consideration on the impact of other activities that might as well have affected the level of the actual factory overhead cost. So now, what happens when a company identifies multiple activities affecting the factory overhead cost? Would the plant-wide and multiple production department factory overhead rates still feasible? So here comes the use of activity-based costing. This would further reduce the possibility of production cost distortions, and together, let's find out why. Activity-based costing provides an alternative approach for allocating factory overhead that uses multiple factory overhead rates based on different activities. Activity Activities are types of work or actions involved in a manufacturing or service process. Example of these activities are assembly, inspection, and engineering design functions. Under activity-based costing, factory overhead are initially budgeted for activities. These as these activities are called activity cost pools. Examples are machine usage, inspections, moving, production setups, and engineering activities. Budgeted activity costs are assigned to products using factory overhead rates for each activity. To derive the activity rate, total budgeted activity cost is divided over the total activity-based usage. So let's continue the illustrative example with Ruiz Company. Did you remember that for using the single plant-wide factory overhead rate method, the total overhead cost of $1.6 million is unilaterally divided to the identified allocation base, which was the direct labor hours only? For multiple production department method, production and assembly were the identified departments in which the costs were divided over the allocation basis. Still, the direct labor hours were the identified allocation base. Now is a different scenario. The fabrication and assembly are now treated as activities rather than departments. Also, you would see that more activities were identified and allocated a certain level of budgeted activity cost. As you can see in the table, now let's identify what are the different activities and its corresponding activity cost pool. So the activities are as follows. First, the fabrication. So this consists of cutting metal to shape the product. So this activity is machine and labor intensive, thus the labor hours. Assembly consists of manually assembling machine pieces into a final product. Thus this activity is also still labor intensive, thus labor hours as the activity cost pool. Setup consists of changing tooling in machines in preparation for making a new product. Each production run requires a setup. Next, quality control inspections consists of inspecting the product for conformance to specifications. Inspection requires product tear down and reassembly. Thus, the activity cost pool for this is inspection. Engineering changes consist of processing changes in design or process specifications for a product. The document that initiates a changing a product or process is called an engineering change order. Just follow the given data as to the different requirements per activity in producing two products, namely the snowmobile and riding mower. Listed are the estimated units of production for both products. The estimated units of total production, the estimated setups, the quality control inspections, and also the estimated engineering change orders for both snowmobile and riding mower. Also, note the direct labor hours per unit it would take each product type in every department, from the fabrication and also the assembly. In order to compute the activity rates, we must first identify what are the total amount for the activity basis so that we can compute the rate. So for the fabrication, we've identified how many direct labor hours it would take to produce a snowmobile and a riding mower. So a total of 10,000 direct labor hours as the total activity-based usage for fabrication activity. For assembly, uh, 2,000 for snowmobile and 8,000 for riding mower. Still a total of 10,000 direct labor hours. For setups, it would take 100 setups for snowmobile and 20 for riding mower, a total of 120 setups. And quality control inspections, 104, taking up a total of 104 inspections. And for engineering changes, 12 for snowmobile and 4 for riding mower, a total of 16 ECOs. For computing the activity rates, simply divide the total budgeted activity cost per identified activities, that is the fabrication, assembly, setup, quality control inspections, and engineering changes, and divide it by the computed total activity-based usage, which we have identified a few minutes ago. So here we have our activity rate, $53 per direct labor hour for fabrication, $7 per direct labor hour for assembly, $4,000 per setup for setup, $3,000 for inspection for quality control inspections, and $13,000 per engineering change order. After identifying and computing the activity rates per activities, we can now compute for the activity cost for each type of products. So as you can see, we've grouped the table into snowmobile and also the riding mower. So for each group, we listed the activity-based usage, the activity rates, and the activity cost. So we can calculate the activity cost by multiplying the activity-based usage by the activity rates that we have computed a while ago. So that for the snowmobile, we have for fabrication $424,000, assembly $14,000, setup $400,000, quality control inspection $300,000, engineering changes $156,000, and a total factory overhead cost of $1,294,000. After that, we divide it by the budgeted units of production to compute the factory overhead cost per unit. So divide it by 1,000 units, we've come up with $1,294 per unit. So that is the factory overhead cost for the snowmobile. So moving on for the riding mower, still, as you can see, the activity rates are the same for both product types. Now, it just differs on the level of the activity-based usage. So we can compute different activity costs because they have different activity-based usage. For the riding mower, if we repeat the steps a while ago, we would come up with a total factory overhead cost of $306,000. And divide it further by the budgeted units of production, 1,000 units, we have $306 of factory overhead cost per unit. Now, we have listed the factory overhead cost per unit using the three cost allocation methods. For single plant-wide rate, it appears a uniform rate of $800 for both products regardless of type. Whether it's a snowmobile or riding mower, it is $800. And for multiple production department rates, because there were two departments identified but only a single allocation base direct labor hours as identified, so we have a resulting cost factory overhead cost per unit for snowmobile for $938 and for the riding mower $662. But when further activities were identified aside from department and aside from the assembly and the fabrication departments, it shows that the snowmobile cost $1,294 for its factory overhead per unit and the riding mower $306 per unit. Here comes the dangers of product cost distortion. So it would seem that the snowmobile is underpriced when using a single or the multiple production department rates method. As you can see, if taking into account the other activities, the true cost is $1,294. And compared to the riding mower, it would seem that this product would be overpriced when using the single plant-wide rate and also the multiple production department rates compared when activity-based costing rate of $306. This would result to dysfunction in sales because it's not the real factory overhead rate for the different types of products, and it may not be competitive with the other products available in the market.
Objective number 5, activity-based costing for selling and administrative expenses. Activity-based costing allocates selling and administrative expenses based on how each product consumes activities. To illustrate, assume that yesterday's watch company has two products. One is the analog and the other one is the smartwatch. Both products have the same total sales volume. However, analog and smartwatch consume selling and administrative activities differently. To illustrate the yesterday's watch company, that is, the activity rate is equals to budgeted activity cost divided by total estimated warranty claim. $150,000 divided by 100 claims is equals to $1,500 per warranty claim. For yesterday's watch company, the product analog watch has 10 warranty claims. times 1,500 per warranty claim is equals to $15,000. For yesterday's watch company, smartwatch product, they have 90 warranty claims times 1,500 per warranty claim is equals to $135,000. In some cases, selling and administrative expenses may be more related to customer behaviors than to differences in products. That is, some customers may demand more service and selling activities than the other customers. In such cases, activity-based costing would allocate selling and administrative expenses to customers. Objective number 6, activity-based costing and service businesses. Service companies need to determine the cost of their services so that they can make pricing, promoting, and other decisions. To illustrate, assume that Hopewell Hospital uses activity-based costing to allocate hospital overhead to patients. Hopewell applies activity-based costing as follows. 1. Identifying activities. 2. Determining activity rates for each activity. And 3. Allocating overhead cost to patients based upon activity-based usage. Hopewell Hospital offers the activities: admission, radiological testing, operating room, pathological testing, and dietary and laundry. Each activity has an estimated patient activity-based usage. Based on the budgeted costs for each activity and related estimated activity-based usage, the activity rates shown in Exhibit 14 were developed. To illustrate, assume the following data for radiological testing. The budgeted cost is $960,000. The total estimated activity-based usage is 3,000 images. The activity rate of $320 per radiological image is computed as follows. Budgeted activity cost divided by total activity-based usage is equals to activity rate. Hence, budgeted radiological testing divided by total estimated images is equals to radiological testing activity rate. $960,000 divided by $320 per image is equals to 3,000 images. Activity cost allocated to patient is equals to activity-based usage times activity rate. Patient, Mia Wilson. Activity-based usage. For admission, only 1. Radiological testing, 2 images. Operating room, used for 4 hours. Pathological testing, 1 specimen. Dietary and laundry, 7 days. For admission, that is 1 admission times $180 per admission, that is $180. For radiological testing, we've used 2 images times $320 per image, that is $640. For operating room, used for 4 hours times $200 per hour, that is $800. For pathological testing, we have 1 specimen used times $120 per specimen, that is $120. For dietary and laundry, that is 7 days times $150 per day, that is $1,050. Total of $2,790. In this exhibit, it can be used by the hospital administrators for decisions on pricing or services. For example, there was a large loss on services provided to patient Sergi Berini. Investigation might reveal that some of the services provided to Berini were not reimbursed by the insurance. As a result, Hopewell might lobby the insurance company to reimburse these services or request higher insurance reimbursement on other services.
For answers to problems, PR11-4B, PR11-5B, and CP11-3. So first, PR11-4B, activity-based product costing. Sweet Sugar Company manufactures 3 products, white, brown, and powdered sugar, in a continuous production process. Senior management has asked the controller to conduct an activity-based costing study. The controller identified the amount of factory overhead required by the critical activities of the organization as follows. So listed are the set of activities and its corresponding budgeted activity costs, totaling to $887,000. The activity bases identified for each activity are as follows. for each activity. Here are the activity base for production, machine hours, setup, number of setups, inspection, number of inspections, shipping, number of customer orders, customer service, number of customer service requests. The activity-based usage, quantities and units produced for